Dear friends, the avoidance pride is their strongest armor and also their greatest prison. It's the part of them that whispers, "I don't need anyone," even though their entire sense of control is built around your presence. As the philosopher Baltasar Gracian wrote, "The proud build walls to keep others out, not realizing they have locked themselves in." When you choose no contact, you're not just walking away, you're also taking away the stage on which their pride performs. At first they will stand tall, appear unaffected, and convince themselves they've won. But pride is a fragile thing. It doesn't break in one sudden blow, it crumbles in silence, piece by piece, when there's no one left to admire it. And then, they pass through that silent journey, moving through the 5 phases we'll discuss ahead. Each phase strips away a new layer of their pride and brings the truth within to the surface. If you recognize yourself or your reality in this, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Phase 1. The illusion of strength. Psychologists call it deactivation euphoria, the temporary relief an avoidant feels when they leave a relationship they perceive as an emotional burden. In this state, the avoidant frames the end of the relationship as a decision fully under their control. "I needed space. I've finally got my freedom back." These statements are not truths, they are shields, built to protect them from the reality that they've lost someone who once anchored their emotional world. The first phase after no contact often appears to the avoidant like a moment of victory. On the surface they seem lighter, freer, as if a weight has been lifted from their shoulders. They may post more on social media, go out with friends, immerse themselves in hobbies or work. To outsiders, and even to themselves, it looks as though they are thriving without you. This is the illusion of strength, a performance not just for the world, but for their own mind. Philosopher Jean Buridan once wrote that the mind has a tendency to choose the more comfortable illusion when faced with 2 painful truths. This is exactly what the avoidant does here. They choose the illusion that they are better off, rather than face the discomfort of vulnerability. But beneath the surface, tiny cracks have already begun to form. They may not be missing you yet, but their routine has shifted in ways they cannot completely ignore. There is no one to share a passing thought with, no one to notice the small details in their day. They dismiss these absences as just adjustments, but the absence is already working on them in silence. In this phase, the avoidant's pride is at its peak. They truly believe they have proven their self-sufficiency. But this pride is not a sign of inner strength, it is a defense mechanism straining to keep a deeper truth at bay. They are not strong here, they are distracted. Every meeting, every laugh, every busy moment is not about joy, but about avoidance. The illusion of strength is powerful because it convinces the avoidant that no contact is affecting you more than it affects them. They assume your silence is a reaction, not a choice. And because they still control the story in their own mind, they see themselves as untouchable. What they fail to see is that time is not on their side. Every day that passes without your voice, without your presence, weakens the foundation of this false strength. Eventually, the distractions will lose their shine, the noise will fade, and absence will no longer be something they control, it will become something they feel. That is why the first phase is not true strength. It is an emotional bluff, one they play so convincingly that even they believe it. But the nature of illusions is that they never last forever, and for the avoidant, the countdown to that collapse has already begun. Phase 2. The unseen shift. Maurice Blanchot once wrote, "What hides in silence is never absent, it waits." In the second phase, the avoidant begins to sense something they didn't expect, not a dramatic wave of longing, but a quiet disturbance they can't fully name. At first, they tell themselves nothing has changed. Their days still follow a schedule, their social calendar remains full, and life on the surface moves forward. But underneath, the air feels heavier. This is the unseen shift, the moment where absence stops being a clean break and starts becoming a presence of its own. The avoidant still believes they are in control, yet subtle reminders begin to appear in their path. A song they once heard with you plays in the background of a cafe. A phrase someone says echoes with your exact tone. An image flashes in their mind when they walk past a familiar street. These moments are not yet strong enough to bring them to their knees, but they are sharp enough to cut through their self-narrative. The avoidant brushes them aside, calling them random memories or just passing thoughts. What they don't realize is that these fragments are seeds, and each one is quietly taking root. In this phase, pride still keeps them from acknowledging the impact you had. They frame these intrusions as harmless, telling themselves, it doesn't mean anything, but their own mind is starting to betray them. It slips you into moments they thought were safe from your presence, proving that memory does not follow the rules of their control. The avoidant now works harder to distract themselves. They seek new routines, not because they are excited by change, but because they are trying to outrun the stillness that reveals what they're missing. Yet stillness is patient. It doesn't chase them, it waits for them to slow down. Over time, this shift deepens. It's not just about what's missing, it's about how everything else feels slightly less vivid without you. The food tastes the same, but the comfort is gone. The conversations flow, but they don't land. Even moments of laughter seem to echo instead of linger. They won't admit it yet, not to you, and not even to themselves. But the truth is clear. Absence is no longer an empty space to be filled, it is now an active force in their life. And for the avoidant, this is the first sign that the story they've been telling themselves is beginning to unravel. Phase 3, the weight of silence. Søren Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest despair is not knowing you are in despair." In the third phase, the avoidant is still showing the same old face, a calm, controlled person who appears to need no one. But the truth is, somewhere inside, the structure has already begun to crack. They can feel this slow collapse, but they never give it a name. This is the phase where pride still stands, but for the first time, a shadow of fatigue begins to settle within it. They don't laugh as much anymore. They attend gatherings, but the taste of conversation feels dull. The laughter comes, but it dies just as quickly. By the end of the day, no matter how busy they've kept themselves, a silence descends, the kind that echoes like an empty room. They scroll through social media, talk to friends, but all of it is just to pass the time, not to connect. This is when the body recognizes the truth before the mind does. The avoidance energy starts to fade. They're no longer as active as before. Mornings become harder to face, and their mind drifts more often throughout the day. This is a heaviness that no denial can lift. In this phase, they quietly begin weighing the safety and comfort of the past relationship. The very moments they once saw as a burden now feel precious. A simple phrase, an old habit, or the unspoken calm of your presence, all of it becomes part of a past they now miss more deeply than their pride will allow them to admit. But they still won't say it out loud. Pride forces them to bury it, to label it as nothing more than tiredness or a temporary low mood. Yet the mind knows this isn't fleeting. It's a growing weight, wrapping slowly around their heart. This phase doesn't arrive like an explosion. It spreads like fog, making the path ahead blurrier with every step. And the more they try to outrun it, the more they realize they're actually standing still in an empty space. This silence is no longer their enemy. It has become their mirror. A mirror that reflects everything they walked away from. And no matter how much the avoidant turns away, that mirror remains in front of them every single day. That's why the third phase can't be ignored. This is the turning point where pride stops being a shield and starts becoming a burden. And once that burden settles in the heart, finding the way back is no longer just an option for the avoidant, it becomes a necessity. Phase 4, facing the truth. Emmanuel Levinas once said, "There are some truths that break you before you can accept them." In the fourth phase, the avoidant reaches a point where pretending is no longer possible. No matter how many activities or social displays they immerse themselves in, the emptiness inside now fully reveals itself. They once tried to cover this void with noise, but now the noise is fading and the silence is so deep that ignoring it becomes impossible. This is when the smallest, most ordinary things start to sting unexpectedly. A particular line in a song, the scent from a familiar cup, or the sight of a street in the city, all sink into their heart like a quiet memory. A memory that was once buried now insists on announcing its presence again and again. For the first time, the avoidant begins to openly think about what they have lost, and this realization is not only mental, it's physical. The heaviness in their heartbeat, the ache in their chest, and the sleepless nights, all combine to form one question: is this all the result of my own stubbornness? This phase is both dangerous and crucial. Dangerous because it is where pride collides most violently with reality. The avoidant knows they will never find that old sense of safety again unless they break down the wall they built themselves. But it is also crucial because this is the moment when the possibility for change is at its highest. At this point, they begin to recall past conversations, those moments when you tried to explain, but instead of listening, they pulled away. Now in those same words they see meanings that were invisible before. This realization comes like a jolt, an admission that perhaps the mistake wasn't only yours, but pride doesn't surrender easily. They still search for justifications within themselves. Maybe they could never truly understand me, or I did what I did to protect myself, yet each justification grows weaker. Because deep down they already know this emptiness is not the result of an accident, it's the direct outcome of their own choices. This phase leaves the avoidant with only two paths: either accept the truth and begin breaking down their walls, or keep moving forward with the same weight, knowing it will never lighten. Often this is the turning point where they begin to think seriously about reaching out, not as part of a game, not to claim a win, but because returning has now become a necessity. The defining feature of the fourth phase is that this decision must be made by the avoidant themselves. No one else can take this step for them, and when they finally do, it's the moment when the last remaining pieces of their pride fall to the ground. Phase 5, the silence of return. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Sometimes we only realize the true value of things when, in the silence, we begin to hear the absence they leave behind." By the time the avoidant reaches the fifth phase, their journey has arrived at its final and most fragile point. This is no longer a game or a battle of egos. This is the moment when they are on the edge of admission, whether that admission is spoken aloud or kept within. They now know that the absence they once saw as a temporary gap has in fact rooted itself deep into their everyday life. In this phase, the avoidant begins to see everything from a new perspective. Old conversations are no longer just words, they are feelings. Past memories are no longer chapters of history, they become a mirror, showing exactly who and what they have lost. Moments that once felt ordinary now reappear as reflections of a rare and irreplaceable peace. Here a strange contradiction emerges. The avoidant can still perform the act of appearing strong, but that act is now only for the outside world. Inside, the truth has shifted. Their heart now longs for contact, yet fear and pride still draw one final circle of resistance around that longing. They think of 100 ways to reach out: a short message, a comment on a photo, an excuse to start a casual conversation again. But each time, they stop with the thought that maybe it's too late. This hesitation is the very silence that makes this phase the most difficult of all. Another truth also becomes clear in the fifth phase. The avoidant realizes that your absence has become a permanent change in their life. No matter how hard they try to move forward, this change is now part of them. And because of that, the decision to return is no longer an act of emotional weakness, it becomes an inner necessity. At this point, they understand the difference between pride and self-respect. Pride brought them here, but now it can no longer stay. If they reach out, it's not because they want to win, but because the fear of losing has already faded. They have come to know that the greatest loss is the one endured in silence, alone, with oneself. And so this is the moment when the avoidant, whether in words or in quiet, turns back toward you. This return doesn't arrive with noise or grand declarations. It comes as a soft, tired knock that simply says, "I've tried everything, and now I know where my peace was." In the end, no contact doesn't just challenge the avoidant, it dismantles the story they've been telling themselves all along. It strips away the illusions of control, the rehearsed confidence, and the carefully curated distance. One by one, the layers of pride fall away, revealing what they worked so hard to hide, that connection was never their weakness, it was their anchor. Through each phase, they discover that absence is not an empty space to be ignored, but a living presence that grows louder in the quiet. It follows them into crowded rooms, sits beside them during sleepless nights, and lingers in moments they thought were safe from memory. The very silence they believed would protect them becomes the mirror that forces them to face themselves. And when pride finally loses its grip, the choice to return is no longer about ego, it's about survival, emotional, mental, and even physical. Because they've learned the hardest truth of all, moving on is easy when the bond was shallow, but impossible when the connection touched something deeper than they can recreate. So, if you've chosen no contact, understand this: you're not just creating distance, you're creating the conditions for clarity. You're allowing the avoidant to meet the one person they've been running from themselves. And when they finally knock on your door, whether literally or metaphorically, it won't be because you chased them, it will be because silence spoke louder than any words could, and they could no longer bear what it was telling them.